everyone, and welcome to this live lesson on painting the Amaryllis. And this is something kind of new to me, going live on Instagram, but I figure I have 15,000 followers. I might as well do this once in a while so that some of you who don't paint might get an idea of what it's like to watch someone paint, and also for my students. This time of year is kind of busy and everyone's, getting ready for the holidays, and I thought we'll take a time out and do something a little different. So if you're watching or painting along, and you're a student of mine, I will also have a recording made, so don't fret if something goes wrong and you don't have the right colors out or something like that. So I'll post it to as a little bonus to Bold Strokes or to my Patreon channel. And if you're new here, you can find a link to my YouTube channel where you can subscribe, and I will be posting tutorials there every month, so that's a good thing to do. It's in my link in my profile on Instagram. You can click it and you'll see a spot for YouTube to put out this little reference photo here of the Amaryllis. And the Amaryllis is a beautiful flower that you can buy the bulbs at Home Depot and grow them yourself, and they'll come out looking like that when they're done. So for now, I've got this little 6x6 Centurion panel, and I was thinking of how I could make this interesting. I want to focus on this one flower here, but I'm going to work out sort of in this video how I'm going to kind of create some interest in the background for such a small painting. You don't have a lot of canvas to work with, so you kind of have to think what kind of colors or washes could make it look interesting. So this little Centurion panel is linen, and that will give it a nice texture when it's done. And so I want to start off with a wash that's kind of gonna look nice with the flower but stand out a bit. So I'm gonna get some Viridian green. Oh, and I've got my colors labeled here, but up here is white and black, and I've got Cad Yellow Light and Cad Red Medium, and then I have some Cad Red Light. Because I'm working on a red flower, I thought I'd need a little extra bright red to jazz things up a bit. I got alizarin, sap, Viridian green, orange, trans red oxide, brown oxide, cobalt blue, and ultramarine blue. And I didn't put out quinacridone red because I don't need a pinky red today. So got my Viridian, but I'm going to tone it down with a little bit of transparent red oxide. And when I'm blending, you notice I didn't put it right into the middle of my Viridian. I'm kind of bringing it in from the side so I can control how much of that color I get in there. So now I'm just going to, I want to just do a little wash of that. I'm kind of looking at where the flower is, but I want this main red flower to stand out. So I'm going to kind of work my way around the outside a little, kind of leave that area in the middle where the flower is. I'm just gonna kind of wing it. I'm just kind of guessing where it's gonna go. And I like that I didn't overly mix the red oxide in because I kind of want that more vivid green. So now that I've got a little of that pigment on, I've got this Viva paper towel. I'm just gonna kind of wipe it around a little, create a little background excitement with that. So I'm just gonna wipe that off, and I don't mind having some of those brush strokes. Some of them I'll have on and I'll leave at the end. I'll leave that behind because I like the texture. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to move to a little smaller brush. This is a 4 flat, and I'm going to kind of sketch a little bit where this flower is going to go. So I'm going to get some of that red oxide, and I just want to use that color just because it's kind of, it doesn't really get in the way. It'll blend with the background. It'll just kind of work. So I'm just going to use that, and I'm going to kind of roughly, just roughly sketch in a little bit of the flower. I want to make sure I've got the center where I want it, and I want to leave room for those petals to really be dramatic. You need to make sure that you've got the drawing kind of the way you want it to show off that flower. So especially, I'm just going to add a little cobalt in there, especially on such a small surface. You know, you have to think of ways to make sure you capture some of the drama that's in this flower. And so I'm looking at a few things, and I'll just point them out while I'm sketching so you know. And you've got these 3 petals here, here, these 3 here. They form a triangle. And then you've got these outside petals here that form a larger triangle. But where the drama comes in is if you create all of them the same size accidentally, which is really easy to do, you won't get the feeling that you want. So part of it, you gotta, you know, get that flower sagging down look is kind of the drama in this case. So I wanna bring it right to the edge, going off the edge, and then this petal's going back and coming in. So there's a real, you know, feeling of that flower, and it gives it a real dynamic look if you capture some of those things. So in the beginning, when you're drafting this thing a little just to warm up, it's good to really just be loose with it, you know, just really make sure you're having fun, and you're kind of, you know, you're really just making sure I'm making sure I have that center where I want it, so that I can make sure that these are the long petals, and these ones are these are going to be in the shadow, and these are catching the light. So also making sure I've got the right direction. So this one comes a little more that way. Okay, so it looks like one big mess now, but you'll get the idea. Okay, so I'm not going to get too much more fussy on the flower, because otherwise my painting it'll get too much like a drawing or too tight. So I'm going to block in some of these shades of red. And another thing to really pay attention to whenever you're painting a flower where you've got real bright reds, or if it's, say, a bright yellow like on a sunflower, you really got to squint down and get that shadow area dark so that these lighter petals will show up. And so in this case, I'm going to use a little, let's see, I'm going to use a little of this brown oxide, and I'm going to use a little of that cad red medium that I put out. I hope I put out enough. Maybe even add a little cobalt to that to get that real dark but warm. You don't want it getting cool. That warm red shadow color. And so I really want to, and I can darken it more later, but I really want to get that in there. And I'm going to look at where the shadow is on this flower so I can really show off those highlights later. So I'm going to put in wherever there's a shadow, and I'm simplifying the shapes. I'm not doing every little, you know, curly, swoopy move. I'm just looking at the basic shapes if I can, and it's a little bit, I mix a little more cad red into that puddle just to change it slowly as it comes out. It gets a little lighter. So I'm just kind of adding a little more of that red there. And I'm just going to get in some of those. These are sort of the mid-tones and darks I'm getting in first. And in here. So if you're watching, thanks for joining me. I can't see who's here or isn't here because my camera is facing down from my iPhone. But I know that on live streams it's fun to say hi, and hopefully later I'll be able to see who tuned in or not. But I hope that you can see everything okay. Okay, so I'm just blocking in some of those reds, and what I'm looking at is in my reference photo, I'm looking at where it's really dark, and then I'm adding a little bit of a lighter red, which is just cad red, and I mix a little cobalt and a little bit of that transparent brown oxide in there to get it a little darker. Just kind of building the shapes. I'm also paying attention to the different petals. So I see these two coming in, and I'll show them off more in a little bit. I'm just going to block in some more. And I want this to be kind of loose. I don't want it to be, I want this flower to look loose and dramatic. So now this petal here is catching the light, so I'm just going to get a little of this cad red light that I have out, which seems to be really stiff for some reason, but I'm going to block in that lighter one using some of that. So I'm just going to block in the basic shapes. I'm using, this is a 10 Bright Aspen. It's something from Michaels. So nothing fancy. I'm just, we're just having fun. And that's the main thing. Especially when you paint flowers, you just want to enjoy the whole experience of looking at these beautiful flowers while you're painting is something relaxing in itself. And so just kind of marking, getting a little more detail work where I see the edge. I'm kind of getting a little bit into that to bring that up a little. And can add a little bit of that cad red light up here. And kind of even bring that off the canvas a little. And this comes down behind there. So I'm just paying attention to the angles, the way the flowers, how these angles meet each other, and the shapes. I'm not thinking too hard about the details. I'm really just trying to get the basic overall shape in there. Okay, and then we've got, okay, so that's sort of, maybe this is a little wider over here. And we could bring this a little further. Okay. Okay, so now we've got a few decisions to make. When you look at a reference photo like this is sort of a white chair, a white table. So we've got this pretty green wash underneath. That can be our lights when you're looking at values. And then we've got some dark reds and greens and this little twig that came in the bouquet. You kind of have to think, well, let's just simplify some of that down. And I'm going to get a little sap green and just take a little brown oxide and just sort of really put in some brush strokes more than anything, not worry too much about putting in the details of those other flowers in there. So I'm just going to get in, starting with this stem. I'll get it in kind of on the darker side using the sap and transparent brown oxide, and I'm just going to work that in there like that. And there's part of another flower up there, so you can put in a little bit of green up there. That, all the background stuff, we want it to be real loose. We don't want it to be on such a small canvas. You don't want it to be overly competing with the rest of this flower. So we're just putting in some darker greens for now. You can add a little alizarin in there and in your sap and get a little dark alizarin and sap mixture just to have some other colors in there. We want to show off this mark here, so let's get in some more sap. And I'm getting these darks in right now for a reason, because I want to have some darks in the background before I start trying to put in the red highlights and whatnot, because you really need some contrast to show that off. So I'm getting some of this dark green in there, and there's some different there's lots going on in the background there. There's some lighter greens, so we can get some of that cad yellow light and some viridian, and that will a little more cad yellow light, and get in some of those pretty greens that are sort of there in the background with all the other stuff going on. Just kind of making interesting design in the background. It's not so much a detail for this little painting. And there's a little bit of a petal showing, so I'm just going to put that kind of going across here. And as you get more into it, you'll loosen up and, add some things that you wouldn't normally do. And so now you've got something happening in the background, but you don't really know what it is, but it doesn't bug you. It just kind of looks like part of the flower. So we've got lots going on, but nothing's really happening yet in the flower. We've just got the basic overall shape. So now what I'm looking at is going back to, now that I've got something in the background, I'm gonna notice things more. So like this little area here is not as long as I'd like it. So I'm just gonna go and get a little more cad red, maybe get some alizarin there, and I want to bring that down to about there. So your eye gets better the more you paint, the more your brain starts to wake up to what's happening. So that's a little better. These are the ones that you want with the feeling of it coming down. So these are your longer petals, and these ones are more your happy petals. They're still coming up like that. So these kind of come down a little bit further. Okay, so now that's going to look a little more accurate. And then this comes a little bit further like that. Okay, so now I feel that's a bit better. And the first thing you want to do before you start shaping any petals is you want to go back and get that center where that darkest dark is again. And I kind of lost it when I was, marking out where the rest of it was going. So I'm going to get maybe some alizarin and some cobalt blue will make a nice dark purpley, dark red. So I'm going to look at my flower and just put that in kind of where I see it here. This whole area is just sort of dark in here. So I'm going to place it in there, and then I'm going to just sort of bring out some of that shadow into the petals. So I can kind of draw that out into the petal a bit. And here you're going to have all those little stems. So you want to just get a little bit of shadow kind of where those are going to come. So from here I'm going to just kind of group them, but then I'm just going to lift off a little as I come out of there, and do it maybe one more time, and you'll see why that brush stroke is necessary later to get sort of a nice loose feel when you're doing detail work on flowers. You don't want to have it too tight. So with all those little stems, you don't want to have them each drawn perfect. So I'm kind of just putting that shadow in ahead of the game. So I'll get the little stems and I'll get the detail to boot. So I'm just gonna put that in there ahead of time. And I'll get some more alizarin and just sort of work that in to some of those shadows there. And there's a shadow that comes to the edge on there. So, and I'm softening that little area there. Okay, so now you can sort of see where things are going, but I gotta go back in and really darken that center again. So I use the paint, and then I go back in and replace that darkness again because it got taken out. And then I'm gonna just drag a few marks down to show some of those little stem details. And I'll just sort of soften the edge a little bit. Put in some of those real dark shadows that come down between those petals. Okay, so you have to get the dark back in there to show off the light. So I'm just gonna, now I'm gonna switch to another brush, 4 flat, and I want to get some lighter, brighter red in there. So this paint is so stiff, I don't know why, but getting some of this cad red light here. I'll add a little bit of terp, and I'm not using any mediums, just some of this terp. I'm just trying to loosen this up a little. This paint is like really stiff. So anyways, I'm going to add a little bit on the light areas of this. So I'm looking at where the shadow is in the reference photo, and I'm just going to put in some of that real bright highlight color where I see it. And there's some here. And I'm going to save that edge because there's a little bit of shadow and then there's a real little bright edge there. put some back on. So I've left, see how that worked? I left that shadow and then I'm adding some of that brighter red there. And up here I'm going to add a little highlight there. And along the edge here. And there's a bit of a bright spot there. And I'm not going to get blending yet. I just want to get in where the edge of the light meets the dark right there. And then it kind of, looking at the way the flower actually goes so that I can make those brush strokes to match the way the flower goes. I would be always paying attention to that when I paint flowers. So you see these natural veins are kind of there because of the brush stroke. So same with this one. There's a real bright spot here, and there's kind of some light coming from behind, so I don't want to, I'm looking at where that light kind of is real bright, but then right here it starts to blend. So I'm just going to put in some light on the edge here where it's hitting. And get some of this cad red. And there's some light on the edge there. And just sort of, I'm just now going to soften some of these edges. And I didn't put any highlight there yet. And right now I'm not putting more paint down. I'm going to drag some of this paint in where I see it kind of coming into the center. And down around here. So I'm kind of creating some of those natural marks that I see in the flower. Now I'm going to get more of just some cad red and just add the odd bit to the edge here. There's so many different reds in a red flower when you're actually painting it. And I'm going to bring this in a little, but not all the way, because you want to have it kind of fading into the shadow. And just kind of bring in a few of those, and I'm paying attention to the brush stroke. The veins all kind of go that way, and then they wrap that way. And okay, and this one here. So I'm just going with the flow. And as I bring these strokes in, I want to leave some of that shadow underneath. So I'm not going to paint all of that. I want some of those little shadows to show up. You know, they don't have to be perfect, but I'm going to pay attention to some of those. Now I'm just going to add some orange in there to really get some of these real bright spots up at the top here. So I added some orange into that cad red light, and that'll kind of jazz that up a little. And that kind of comes behind here. Just kind of softening those edges a little. And then there's just a few little hits of light kind of in the inside here, and one over here. And there's now a little bit I see with using some white, and you can use some cad red light and make sort of you know, where the highlights are, there's definitely more of a white red mix. it gets more like pink. So I'm adding a little white now into this red. I haven't added any so far, and that's why the colors are the way they are. So now I'll add some of these lighter, there's sort of a pinky red highlight on some of the edges here that you want to get. So I'm just adding some white into that. You can add a little orange and a little cad red there. And I'm looking at the reference photo and just putting in some of these brighter and I would say cooler highlights that are right up at the edge here. There's some. And up here. So all these different reds. And definitely some here. You want to get that light hitting the edge of that petal there so you can see that shadow coming out. And then here it's lighter below, so that shows the edge of that petal, and it kind of comes in, cuts in a bit like up here. And there's a real little tip that has some color, lighter color. So we're getting some shape there, and you could add a little bit of a different value of red. Just don't make it in the background, just don't make it you know, too bright. I'm using some of this darker red and I'm just putting it in just to have some variety there. But I really want to simplify and keep this as the main flower. So now we've got the little stems to add in. I'm going to just use some, they're actually quite dark and they have a little bit of a highlight on them, so I'll just use some of this alizarin, and I'll try using, this is a number 4 flat, so I could just use the edge of this, and the little stem thingies come to about here. There's 6 of them, and then there's an extra long one that comes all the way out to about there. So I will just kind of put that long one in first, and then I'm just going to, I never want it to be super super perfect because that's not my style, but you can always do that. I'm just going to put 1, 2, and then you can't really see the stem, and then you can see one stem over here, and can, you know, kind of bring them into that center. And I'm going to wipe my brush because I pulled it right into that center to show the marks. I'm just going to see if you can see up closer. Anyways, you could hopefully see that. And then I'm going to get, I have a smaller detail brush, this little one. It's got a little pointy tip. I'm just going to put on, I'll mix up something here that I can use for those. So I'll use some maybe transparent red oxide and a bit of yellow. And so, it, you know, if you have yellow ochre, that's perfect, but I didn't want to put too many colors out. So I'll just use this for starters, and then I'm going to add a highlight. So this is just, maybe I'll add a little white to that mix. So I put some transparent red oxide and cad yellow light and a little white. And what I do is I just kind of look at basically where they are, and I'll just kind of dab some of those on. So there's some up here, and you just kind of look at the the direction they go. There's one kind of going that way, and I don't want it to be, you know, perfect, just sort of getting the basic shape on there. And now I'll get a little more white and add it to that mix, and some more yellow, and I want to show those off because those are the things that really, you know, add something to your painting. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but the word amaryllis means to sparkle, so I'm going to leave a bit of that shadow and just put a little highlight on the edge of that one. And this one will have more light, but that one I'll just maybe leave the way it is. So, and then this little stem down here has a little bit of a pink end to it, so I'm just going to add some white into that red mix that I had made with I think it had some alizarin in it, so it makes it a little more pinky. And I'm just going to put a little highlight like that on there. I don't want it to be too detailed. And you can get a little, whoopsies, you can get a little bit of that white and just add a few real light spots to the edge of this flower where it's catching the kind of shine from the light above. And there is something going on inside there that I can't see, so I'm just going to get some cobalt, and that'll kind of create a darker but lighter color. And I'm just going to put a little bit of whatever that is. I don't quite know what that is, but I'm just going to add a bit of that inside there. Okay, so now we've got mostly the basics there. I want to just go and now that I've got everything kind of happening, I just want to go back and maybe just fine-tune some of those highlights. So I'll add a little bit of that orange to my Cad Red light mix, and I just want to go back and really make sure some of these highlights are really going to show here. And kind of looking at my reference photo and kind of going back and forth here, and this kind of comes down a little stronger, and a little bit more light here. Sometimes you kind of have to really squint down and look at your reference photo to make sure you've got the right basic values happening. And soften some of that a little. There's a little light catching on that edge there. And here. And just gonna get some of this darker red and sort of bring a little bit more of that in there. Some of that lighter red. And that can be tricky, so you don't want to add too much. You just want to soften that edge a little. And add a little bit of light to the top of that. And just sort of get some of that lighter red there, and then I'm going to go back and put in a little bit of a darker red here. Oh yeah, and I want to add a little bit of a red, brighter red to this, to the top of some of these little stems without painting over the whole thing. I'll put in a little bit of light on top of those. And so now I want to add something a little different to the background. I'm going to go to these areas in the photo that are a little lighter, and I'm going to just sort of mix up some bluey, kind of gray, bluey gray, but make it a light value and add a few kind of bluey gray colors just to contrast with some of the red. So I'm going to get more white in there and a little cobalt, and I had some of that cadmium red mix that I had there just to dull it down. And I'm gonna put in just something a little different. See how that looks. Maybe a little bit lighter. I just added a tiny bit of that brown oxide just to, yeah, I want to get some of those brighter, some of that light gray in there just to add something, just another kind of color in there. And I'm trying to keep it loose, so I don't want it to be exact. I'm just adding a few spots of it here and there just to kind of add another, just something else to it besides all the greens. And I'm just kind of softening some of those edges. And it kind of makes it, you know, you got to find something to kind of make it a little bit different. So now I'm going to get some blues, cobalt, and mix it in with that, you know, light grayish color. And I'm going to mix up something that's just a little different here. It looks kind of bluey, little bit of hint of purple, and I'm going to add some of that in to the stem down there, and make sure it goes up and under, and then a little bit of that up there and there. Just, you know, you have fun with it. This is your painting. I like to add a little bit of something different. I'm going to mix a little more blue into that mix, and I put a tiny bit of that dark purpley, cobalty blue, kind of a few little hints of that on those stems up there, just to, you know, mix it up a little. And it's a lot more interesting if you get, I'm going to get some of this red, and I want to put a little splash of that up there, maybe a little hint of red up, pink up here. And I like to, you know, kind of get the colors, just get some different things going on, you know, near the end, just because, you know, you want it to look exciting, not just same old, you know. So I'm just kind of blending some of this. I added some white to that Viridian mix, and I'm just adding some bits of, you know, action to those, to the background. You don't really even know too much like what it is. You just, If you don't like it, you can always soften it off, or you can take your darker green and remove it. But you know, it just adds a little fun to it. And the only thing I want to do is I want to add a little more dark to the shadow on this leaf so that it kind of brings it forward from that leaf that's behind. And I'm just kind of adjusting that a little so that it stands out. It's harder than you think to get these reds to really pop, you know. I don't paint a lot of red flowers, so that might be it, but I'm just gonna get that shadow back in there a bit more. So, and you can add a little shadow where you get some alizarin, just you can work in a little more shadow if you want to show off that petal. And some of these shadows where the leaves curl. And kind of same thing down here. And then there's some more light, get a little more light red and kind of add it to the petals. So that's the idea now. I think I can add a bit of red here and there, but I think other than that, that's how I would kind of go about painting an amaryllis right now. I'm gonna just let you know one more time that if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, to go and subscribe. And also you can join me for full-length lessons on other subjects through my Patreon channel. And I'm really glad that I could be here today to do this demo for you. And I hope that you all have a really good Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank you so much for watching. And I can see some of the faces now that I'm above my phone. I can see Marion, and thanks for coming. And some of the names I don't know, but thank you so much, Nancy, and everyone who came out today, Tatiana, and Michelle, and Emily. Thank you so much, everybody. It was really fun. And I'll probably start to do this more often so that I can, you know, reach more people with my art. So thank you so much.